Have you ever been FM'd so badly that even though you still won the game, you came away feeling extremely angry? Well, I have a story for you. Remarkably, this is now the 5th season in a row where a Hungarian side is competing in a European final. This time I'm not going to spoil whether it's us or one of the others, but needless to say, you're going to want to head over to stream after you watch this video, as we're going to be watching/doing the final at that point too. So see you over there in a minute. The VODs of all the streams can, of course, be found on the second channel, StraightRedCard, linked in the description. The VODs go out a day after each stream. Also, later in the week, I have one of the strangest videos I've ever made relating to FM coming out, so stay tuned for that. Now, at the start of the last recap video, I of course mentioned that we had Haladash in a European final against Leeds. So we're going to quickly review that for those of you that of course didn't get a chance to go over and watch that as well. So this is sadly what happened. 3-2 to Leeds. This is now the 3rd time in 4 years that a Hungarian side has been in the Conference League final, and the 3rd time that they have lost in the Conference League final. In fact, I think this 3-2 scoreline has happened before as well. But now bringing ourselves back to reality a little bit, season 14 of Building a Nation with MTK Budapest was one of potential, because with us gaining such huge ground on Germany and Italy this season by virtue of them losing good seasons and us losing quite a bad season, it was one of potential. The biggest problem being, though, of course, us having 7 sides in Europe still not really ready to handle that yet, and as a result it was always going to be a difficult one. If we could just maintain our station, that would be considered a good season. But before that, let's talk transfers, because a lot of the outrageous players that I gave you a sneak preview of at the end of the last recap have now joined us, along with some absolutely redonkulous compatriots. It is mad, some of the players we found this year. One in particular, loudest plane in the history of the universe now flying over. Also, I've just seen myself in the little camera monitor here, and I've realized I look way more like Ace Ventura today than I was intending, so alrighty then. The first outs, and this year it's been a bit of a struggle for us to actually drum up any real cash, which is why we've put ourselves in a slight financial problem. And that means that this summer there's most likely going to have to be at least one major sale just to keep the books balanced for yet another season. However, in all of that, we did manage to make some, I would say, ridiculously good money on João Firmino, Alvin Antunes. He came in for one season for £9 million just to plug that gap until we could get Ismail Giddy, and remarkably Benfica decided it'd be a good idea to offer us £28 million for him 1 year later. So a steady 20 million profit on a single guy in one season is extremely good business, and it's these kind of deals that I think we are going to have to keep doing. And we nearly pulled off the deal of the century doing this by nearly stealing Bayern's star striker Kane Fullerlove on a free transfer. Unfortunately, he went to Manchester City in the end, but that could have been genuinely a deal that could have netted us £200 million. It was insane, but sadly it fell through. But now to the ins. Now, some of these guys I previewed you at the end of the last recap video, so I'm going to gloss over them a little bit, but I will still show you just in case you missed them. First up was Marco Platzer for £4.2 million. He's disappointed a little bit in terms of the potential that we were hoping to see from him, but nevertheless, 5 goals, 5 assists on loan this season, can't really complain. However, the £5 million we spent on Alexander Radovanovic was a very different matter. Man has played, 30 games in the top flight this season for, albeit relegated, Zalaegerszeg, but for £5 million, he's got a Serbia cap, he's now worth 30 to 40 million quid. He was an absolute monster pickup, very happy. In a similar vein, Nestoras Mikros has kind of alternated between 4-star and 5-star potential, but he's already got 3 Greek caps while out on loan at Vasas this season, playing a pretty solid year in the second tier, already worth a load of money. He's definitely still a bargain, maybe not quite the wonder kid we thought he might be though. That, however, cannot be said for Łukasz Barteczko, who's been on loan at Zirmot this season in the second tier, played another fantastic year for them. He is ridiculous. 2.7 million we paid, he's worth 30 to 40 million pounds himself, another player with 2 caps for Poland already. And one of the other things that I think is going to help us when it comes to building a nation is the fact that we have to hoover up all of this young talent means that they're not going to clubs outside of Hungary, they're staying with us and with the other Hungarian sides, which means not only are we getting better, but we're also potentially harming the future of the other big European sides, which could help us as a nation overall. It's international sabotage, if you like. Next was the £5 million we dropped on Martin Bender. No international caps for him just yet, but he has also completed a relatively solid season in the second tier for Jury, as they had a fantastic year, so he didn't quite get in the team as much, but he's still an extraordinarily good player and will surely be excellent in the future. Still only 17. But now I bring you arguably the best striker prospect since Milovanovic, who has been integrated more into the first team this season, but this guy is a different kettle of fish. This is Blaž Žurin, or Blaž, because we just have to call him that. £8.5 million from Dinamo Zagreb. He has 4 caps for Croatia already. He's worth 50 to 60 million pounds at the age of 18. He's been out on loan at Újpest for the second half of the season. He's definitely not going back to them this season. We thought that giving him a loan in the second half would help him develop a little bit, but he simply hasn't played enough. He's a guy that I think he comes back and he goes straight into our first team setup. Him and Milovanovic, I think, are the future of our strike force beyond Bobby Tree and Castillo, but he, for me, could be the second coming of Juliet from the last save. He is simply that good. Then an incredible 450 grand for Josef Kovacs. I mean, he's only 16, but come on, look at the price value. On one last absolute monster, just to add to that, this is Jonathan Kvamen from Rosenborg. Again, too young to go out on loan, but you can see Norway this season, or in the last 2 years, have produced some monster talent, and we've picked out most of it, to be honest. Another 5-star potential player. They're still out there, and there's still so many. But that actually completes the ins. You can see that it has been almost exclusively just young talent for the first team. Now, this summer's transfer plan is going to be different, as we expect to lose someone like a Yeboah or a Labros Kontavrakis, or someone like that, for in excess of £60 million, which will help finance us. And there's a couple of slightly older players that I'd like to bring in to try to do the same deals as we did with Antunes. I'll just show you one example. This is Diego Hidalgo. He's available for, well, he actually has a release clause. I don't know why it's not showing it there, but he has a release clause, I believe, of about £9 million. And if we could sign him for £9 million, there's no way that in Europe, this guy, on the streets of Europe, this man is valued surely into the 60, 70 million pound range, and will be a fantastic flip for us over a course of a season or two, I suspect. Now, you may remember Liam Skinner for a couple of seasons ago. We call him Skinnerinho now because he's in a social group which is just him and 7 Brazilian chaps, which I just really enjoy the thought of. But that isn't why we're here. We never thought that he'd have any chance of getting international caps because he could barely get a game for Liverpool, and he was going to be a bit part player here. You might notice, though, that man somehow managed to get a random England cap out of nowhere, and I'd kind of had enough when that happened. Going back to bed. I don't even care. Let me know when he's like changed his mind or something, all right? Because this is just getting silly now. Tactics this season have remained basically the same, with us alternating between the 5-star trek in the league with a slightly lower tempo and our normal style of play for the Champions League. We did actually try out an 8 trek system in a random cup game, and it actually worked, but I wouldn't recommend you try it in a normal match, although it did bring us the worst free kick of all time. Jarju and Montiel are gonna... This season, of course, we won the title, as you would expect, but you'll see 4 defeats in there, 3 draws. It certainly wasn't as emphatic as it has been in recent years, in spite of our attempts to make that so, especially as you'll see Budapest with 76 points, which is the highest points ever for a second-place side in Hungary, which should really tell you everything about the season they've had. They actually lost less games than we did and managed to beat us. I think it was 4-0, actually, at one point. And another point, which I want to show you here on the past positions, is that at one point, 15 matches into the season, Budapest were actually top of the league for 2 match days. That's how good they were at the start of the year. I think they won something like 16 of their first 17 league games, and there was a draw in there as well. They were ridiculously good and really do feel like the successor to us in a way that's not really been seen before. They're the first side that have really brought it to us, and you can see that from their goal difference too. What you'll also notice that Ferencváros came 7th this season. They're always the number 2 in Hungary, and it couldn't happen to a nicer bunch. We really kind of needed that to happen. They've struggled in Europe over the last few years, and we felt that they kind of needed a break from the Champions League, where they hadn't won a game in like 30 matches. So they will be playing in the Europa League, as they actually won the cup final, annoyingly. It's just going to be good to have them in a slightly lower competition this year, with Újpest, Kisvárda and Debrecen competing in the Champions League. But it was very, very close in there. Nice to see Haladáš getting back into Europe as well with their absolutely stacked side. But you can really see the divide between the top 7 and everybody else now, basically down to the goal differences mostly. But Puskás do manage to stay up fairly comfortably. They have a tycoon takeover as well, which means that I expect to see Puskás really starting to climb the ladder over the next few seasons. They spent 13 million on players this year, despite having, well, money obviously, but not through the same means as everybody else. But that's the domestic stuff. Let us move now and turn our attention to Europe, because that's obviously what this save is about. So how did we get on in the Champions League this season? Played fantastically well in our opening game against PSG. Texi gave us the lead, but unfortunately a mistake at the back cost us, as Kylian Mbappe, who must be fairly old by now, was able to get PSG a somewhat undeserved equaliser, but we're kind of used to that by now. Luckily, we remembered who we were against Juventus, absolutely twatting them 4-0. Malero Castillo, Kontavrakis and Patrice Villaume, who has now become world-class this season. Absolute monstrous season from Villaume. And then that very much continued away at Nice, where it was anything but nice for them as we hit them for 7. Castillo with the hattie, 2 for Silva, 1 for Montiel and 1 for Tex-Mex, 7-0, and we were flying. And it got even better with another consecutive victory with no goals conceded. Malero this time with 2 penalties, Silva with a goal, and it's another game of creating 4 XG or more. Just clearly the best side in the Champions League at this stage. And then we went away to Old Trafford, and honestly, it should have been another victory. We went in front very early on from Malero. Hossiu equalised for them, but then 2 quick goals from Castillo put us 3-1 up at Old Trafford. And then I made a tactical tweak because we just had a raid on stream and I was trying to show off a tactic because I thought, oh, we're 3-1 up now, it'll be fine. It wasn't fine. Chris Smith got on back for United before Giorgio Scalvini bundled one over the line. I say him, it was mostly our goalkeeper for some reason. The ball was rolling along the line and the keeper just sort of slid into it instead of just picking it up. But then this is Football Manager. Luckily, though, we bounced back with a good win away at Milan. Darla and Bobby Tree grabbing the goals. I must say, though, this was a very unfair result. I think Milan were actually very good, so we were a little bit fortunate to get the win here. So it kind of balances out the PSG one. We then hammered a struggling Bodo side. Villom gave us an early lead, and 3 late goals from Bobby Tree and Lucas Martin Santos just finished things off. Another game creating 4 XG or more and just sliding through. Then we faced the team that we always sell all our players to, and it mattered not. Tex-Mex and Castillo grabbing the goals. Velasquez then decided to 2-foot someone for no reason, and then we just carried on being dominant. Dortmund offered nothing in this match, even against 10 men. It was fabulous. I feel like we possibly could have had more points in this group. I think only a little bit because of the Manchester United result. I think the Milan one was lucky, and against PSG we were unlucky. That kind of balances out. Against United, though, that was just me being silly, but it did cost us because I think we could have won the group otherwise. As you can see, we got 3rd in the group, but had we got that win against Manchester United, we'd have been top with 22 points. It doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things, but I feel like you do actually get a little bonus if you get that. But 26 goals scored and only 4 conceded in our 8 Champions League matches is definitely the most dominant we've looked, and I really do feel like we're mixing it with the best no matter what we do in Europe most seasons. I know we're talking about us in Europe at the moment, but I figure since we're on this screen, we might as well quickly discuss the other Hungarian side's performances. I mean, Ferencváros, another season and no wins. Sadly, they only got 2 draws this time. It has now been over 30 matches since Ferencváros won a European game. God help them. Thank God they don't have a game in the Euro Champions League next season. Thank God they're going to be playing in the Europa League where they might actually have a chance. But you'll notice here that Budapest and Debrecen, yep, they were both in the group stage this year. Debrecen got a very lucky draw in the playoff round against Midtjylland, a team who are normally in the Conference League, and were able to clump them comfortably. I think it was 5-1 on aggregate or something, and sneak through. But you'll notice that both Budapest and Debrecen qualify for the knockouts of the Champions League. Insane scenes. Standout results for Budapest coming against, well, Atletico Madrid, and obviously a great victory over Lech Poznan, but also taking draws away at Dortmund and Benfica is absolutely astonishing from them, and they are really carrying the flag for Hungary at the moment, other than us. Debrecen, though, equally impressive. An away win at Nice and a great home victory against Galatasaray gave them the groundwork. Not to mention a 1-1 draw at the Etihad against Manchester City, who you might be noticing are all the way down in 28th. They were actually sat 31st until they won their final game of the group. Their only victory in the entire group stage came on the final match day. They only scored 6 goals in the entire group stage, and 3 of them were in the final match against Dynamo Kiev. Absolute scenes. We'll come back to how they got on in the knockouts in a second, but first let's talk about us. As our reward for coming 3rd in the Champions League was Bayern Munich. And now let's talk about the title of this video, because it isn't so much a single game as 2 matches, an entire tie of just madness that happened here. So firstly, we went away to Bayern and played phenomenally, played them off the park on their own patch, somehow a 0-0 draw. The biggest issue for us here was that we just couldn't hit a shot on target. Every time our player went through on goal, they would just miss the target entirely. It was absolutely mad. There's still a couple of good saves out of Swanina, but nothing major. It was genuinely surprising, and we felt that, you know what, if we played that well away from home, surely at home we'll be able to absolutely batter them. And well, we did, but somehow the scoreline didn't represent that. We finally managed to score a goal in this tie after Malero put us in front after 15 minutes, all was looking good. But then, Bayern's literal first shot on target of the entire match from Josep Luis Vidal was enough to grab them an equaliser out of nowhere. And you'll notice our statistics for this match, we were doing quite well. And somehow the game went to extra time. We'd already created over 4 XG at this point, and it was like 6.3 on the tie for 1 goal. But then, in the 122nd minute of the tie, this happened. Oh, just head the football, even if it doesn't go in. Yes! Obviously, we were glad to get through. We just couldn't believe that we created 7 XG against Bayern over 2 legs and only managed to win the game 2-1. Just astonishing scenes. It's just one of those games where we create chance after chance after chance. And in the second leg, it wasn't like we weren't hitting the target either. The keeper made 13 saves. Absolute madness. Because I felt that we could have probably lost this on penalties, because that's just how things go. But my goodness, what a hurdle to overcome. Luckily, our reward for passing that hurdle was Barcelona. We flew into an early lead through Castillo and Tex-Mex and were just destroying Barcelona. But naturally, they did still score their only shot on target of the match to make it somehow 2-1 going into the second leg. And then this happened in the second leg. Have you noticed how much more consistent he's been at actually getting those over the last 2 seasons? I would say, oh my God. Fuck me. Which, of course, led us to going to penalties against them, which is just, you never know what can happen with penalties. Because then this happened. Come on. Portillo versus Jeremy. Man has walked out of the way of the penalty. Luckily, Portillo then saved 2 penalties in sudden death, and it was enough for us to win the match on penalties in the end. But my goodness, Malero and Navarro missing penalties for us. Barcelona had one hit the post, actually, from Conceição, but Robinei and Rapanaro managed to have their shots saved by Portillo. Barcelona deserved to win on the night as it goes. It was just the way it happened, which was very, very annoying indeed. We couldn't bloody believe it. So he nearly cost us it all, and nearly cost us it all again in the penalty shootout, but then did redeem himself. But we moved through to the semi-final against Manchester United, and I felt we had their number after the way things had gone, as we then had the mother of all luck, swinging back the other way. Finally, and we have to hold our hands up. This game was stupidly lucky from us. Aman gave them the lead early on in this game. Malero got an equaliser for us as it was quite even, but then United just went at us for the rest of this match, and Portilla put on a goalkeeping masterclass. He is fun. If nothing else, the man is entertainment. He'll do mad shit, but he'll also do amazing stuff at the same time. And we had hope that with that 1-1 going back to the home leg, we could be a lot better. And that is exactly what we did. Tex-Mex in the 43rd minute. Brandon Silva played one of the best passes I've ever seen. Slotted Tex-Mex through. Everyone thought it was offside. It wasn't. 1-0. Tex-Mex with the winning goal. And we are in the Champions League final. For the second time in 3 years, we will play in the Champions League final against Chelsea. A much, much tougher final. I think Chelsea is going to be a much, much sturdier test, but I still think that we are massively up for it. And I'm excited to get stuck in. So that is obviously what we're going to be doing over on stream today. Full final, full match, full suit. You'll love to see it. But that's us out of the way. Let's talk about the other Hungarian sides. In the first leg, sadly, Debrecen were beaten 2-0 at home by Dortmund, but what would you expect, really? And it was a similar story as Bayern beat Újpest by 2-0. Újpest are good, but they're not that good. Especially as in the second leg, Farim was sent off. Bayern hit them for 3 more goals, including Kane Fullerlove, the player we nearly stole from them, for a 5-0 victory. I'll just show you the guy. We nearly picked him up on a free transfer. But then something ridiculous happened. Debrecen scored twice against Dortmund away and then won at penalties. They knocked Dortmund out of the Champions League in the knockout rounds. It's the first Hungarian side to ever win, in this save anyway, a knockout round that wasn't us in the Champions League. And it's Debrecen of all people with Mitkov and Kevin Pays. We could not believe our eyes when that scoreline shot up on the screen. Then remarkably in the round of 16, they took a 2-2 draw against Chelsea. If it wasn't for a last minute equaliser, Chelsea would have lost against Debrecen here, which gives us a bit of hope for the final, maybe. In the second leg, sadly, it wasn't to be, as Baena and Rodrigo gave them a 2-0 victory for a 4-2 on aggregate, but Debrecen run them bloody close. They actually gave it a really good try, and I'm so impressed by them this season in general. We had Kecskmet and Molfehvar. Now, you'll notice that Kecskmet sitting 12th, not a bad result at all. 14 points, 4 wins on the board for them as well. Against Monaco, Apoel, Dinamo Batumi, and Sporting. They beat Sporting. Remarkable scenes there. Molfehvar didn't Fehervar quite so well down in 21st in the end. Got 3 victories, though, all at home against Atalanta, Stuttgart, and Shakhtar. Pretty much saving the day for them there. But 11 points comfortably sails them through to the next round of the Europa. Where sadly for Molfehvar, it wasn't a great time. Drawing Newcastle was the worst thing that could have happened to them. They did manage to get a goal, but a 2-1 defeat at home was not to be. But notice, Kecskmet, 1-0 winners against Besiktas away, with Francois Xavier Hardy scoring the winning goal. What a result, which was then compounded with a 3-0 hammering in the home leg. Salifu and Batista grabbing goals for a 4-0 victory against Besiktas is not bad. Molfehvar as well fared okay against Newcastle. Only 5-3 on aggregate isn't too bad against a side you'd expect to be one of the favourites. But Kecskmet getting through to the next round, where sadly they'd play Napoli, and Napoli are a little bit good. A 2-0 victory in the end for Napoli there, not ideal. Then followed up with another 2-0 victory with Turchetti grabbing it, 4-0, outgo Kecskmet, but I'm just super happy for them, considering that they didn't do very well in the league this season. For them to do this well in Europe was pleasing, which left just one team in Europe, and that was Kisvárda in the Conference League, who did a damn fine job in the end, coming 6th overall, beating Shamrock Rovers, Rosenborg, Elfsborg, Kerper, and of course Apollon Limassol. Just very respectable results. You'd expect them to win all those matches. The one loss they did get in there is against Maccabi Haifa, who are also a very good side, but 5 wins out of 6, 15 points, easy as you like, straight through in 6th spot. But they then lost their first leg away at Young Boys. Only 1-0, felt that the home leg would probably be a way for them to get through. And then it just wasn't. They won the game, but then went out on penalties. Really disappointing from Kisvárda, who'd shown a lot of quality, to then just lose a random tie like that. And you could see that the points weren't looking so great for Hungary with that. And we really were carrying a lot of it this year, which is why, as you can see, as things stand, we're still looking at 6th on the year, which is where we've been the last 2 seasons. 15.78 is still good, and it's still better than the season we've lost. But obviously, when you look at France and Germany, they've outperformed us this season. Italy have been up towards the 20 points again. That's what we were really looking at. Now, the great thing about this year is you can see the amount of points gained on the teams above us was huge, and that's what's allowed us to sort of keep our parity going into next year, which is what actually matters. You can see that we keep the gap to France looking pretty tasty, but next year is where it gets ridiculous, because we're going to lose 19.7 and France will leapfrog us immediately. So there's a real chance that we can actually slip to 6th next year. However, I think that could be a good thing, because the sides are getting stronger. They're clearly getting more points in this second season of having 7 teams in Europe and looking better. But because they are strengthening, there's just no doubt about it. They're spending a lot more money and the sides are getting better. It just takes a little bit of time for that to finally happen. If we were to drop down briefly and have less sides in the higher competitions, I reckon our sides could absolutely clean up in the Europa and the Europa Conference, which could allow us to have a sort of 23-point season potentially, or something like that, that could catapult us straight back into the upper echelons. And I think we're going to have to sort of slingshot our way to truly catching those other sides. So, youth intake this year was a bit of a weird one, because we've now decided to actually get rid of our head of youth development entirely and go Hoidless. We're trying out the RDF method. Now, obviously, I know that it takes a few years for your new Hoid to actually have an impact on it, but we've just decided at this point, what's the harm, eh? What is the harm? Because this was our youth intake for this season. Yeah, now, so actually, Farkash has actually been upgraded slightly. Originally, they were all 3-star, which is still okay. Let's not pretend that it isn't. But, you know, it would just be nice to see one sort of player that we could maybe use at some point. That since Zoltan, there's not really been anyone that stood out. And even he is really not going to be ever playing for us. He's most likely to be a loanee farm for the rest of his career. And speaking of the loan farm, we've now hit an all-time record. We're at negative 99 loans, which obviously, for those of you keeping count, is, I believe, 157 loans. 157 loans. Now, you'll also note here, bear in mind, we're in May, so it means we haven't extended any of the loans yet. You'll notice a lot of these loan expiry dates are, well, not this May, they're next May. So, I have a story for you. While I tell you the story, I'll just sort of show you the top scorers of the loan farm. So basically, we wanted to try that thing where we propose loan extensions from this screen a month before their loans end, rather than waiting for that screen that pops up that tells you stuff, because we felt that it might be more efficient. And believe me, it was. It still takes a little while to right-click on every player and go into the transfer plays and go propose loan extension. Obviously, we can't do it yet because it's not a month before. It's like 1 day away from it. And we got most of the guys on loan extended, and all was happy. So then cut to a few streams later, and I'm just looking through the loan stats before a stream, chilling. And I notice that a lot of the loans suddenly have a extension date, or rather a loan expiry date, that is over a year into the future, when it's normally 1 year. And my initial thought was that somehow when we proposed loan extensions, they'd all gone for 2-year loans, but I don't remember seeing that in the contracts. So I haven't actually talked to Stream about this, but this is what I believe has actually happened there. Because we're proposing the loan extensions a month before their thing is expired, it's still in this season. There's not been that tick over point yet where it like crosses over into the following season. So as a result, the terms in the deal would have obviously had to say end of next season, because that's literally what it would have been at that point. However, because those terms, I believe, don't come in until their loan is officially finished, I believe that it's carrying that over into the start of the next season, and thus it's actually giving them a 2-year extension when it possibly should only be giving them a 1-year extension. Now, I don't know if that's a glitch or whether that's intentional. Either way, it's basically allowing us to do 2-year loan extensions once they're already out on loan. By extending their loans, you can give them a 2-year one, which gives you so much more security at keeping your loan farm together, and will give you like a 50% less chance of players actually wanting to come back because they've got 1 year less to do it. And that, for me, is potentially a game changer. Honestly, really, really pleased to see that. Now, finances, I mentioned that. We're down to 46 million in the bank. You can see we have lost £72.5 million this season. Now, part of that has come from the fact that we've been sharing our stadium with Ferencváros this season, and that means that we've had to pay for that privilege, but also we have a stadium names right deal that I told you about last year that is something like 15 to 16 million pounds a season, but we don't get it this year because we weren't playing in our own stadium. We're obviously now back into it for next year with our brand new expansion, but it means that we missed out on 15 million quid just from that. In addition, haven't really sold many big players. Antunes was the biggest sale. He was 22 million pounds, 28 million rising, and we've spent way more than that on players this season because we normally do, which is why I suspect that we are going to have to see a sort of 60-70 million pound sale of someone like Yeboah or Kontavrakis over the course of this summer, just to keep us afloat, keep us going, because the last thing we want to do is get into financial trouble where the board might sell one of the players that we really cannot afford to lose. We have a budget still of 30 million pounds of transfers, but obviously we don't want to be spending too much of that when we only have 46 million in the bank. Stay tuned though, as I do have like I said, another quite mad video coming up later in the week. All I'll say to you is about it, if you've ever wondered what FM would be like if it was played on Mount Everest, you can find out later in the week. I'll just leave it at that. So if you have enjoyed this, drop a like. If you're new to the channel, subscribe. Stream on Twitch, you know the drill. I'll see you over there in a minute. Hold your gun. Capybara. Bye-bye.